Max Verstappen just said the quiet part out loud. Red Bull's Barcelona problem is not just one bad setup. It is deeper. Because when a four-time world champion keeps talking about no grip, no balance, rear instability, curb problems, and time vanishing in the corners, he is not describing a small mistake. He is describing a car that may be fundamentally wrong. And Barcelona is the worst place for that to happen, because this track exposes everything. The Red Bull is overweight. The setup window is too narrow. Ferrari has surged ahead with Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes and McLaren are pulling away. And now Verstappen's own words are pointing to the truth Red Bull hoped nobody would see. Max is not just frustrated. He may have realized the car cannot be fixed with simple adjustments. And if that is true, this is not a bad weekend for Red Bull. It is the beginning of a much bigger collapse. Subscribe to the channel. The first layer of this story is simple. Barcelona did not create Red Bull's crisis. Barcelona exposed it. That is why Verstappen's words carried so much weight. This was not a driver reacting to one messy session, one poor tire run, or one setup choice that missed the mark. This was Max pointing back to the same problems that have followed Red Bull all season, and saying, in effect, they are still here. No grip. No balance. Rear instability. Time lost in the corners. And for Red Bull, that is the part that should cause real alarm. Because a champion can live with a difficult car for one weekend. He can fight through a bad balance window, rescue points, and move on. But when the same issues keep returning at different tracks, the team has to ask a much darker question. What if the problem is not the setup? What if it is the car itself? That is what Barcelona made impossible to ignore. The Spanish circuit is one of the clearest tests of a Formula One car because it asks for everything. The car needs stability through long corners. It needs a rear end the driver can trust. It needs clean direction changes. It needs to protect the tires. It needs balance from the start of the lap to the end. If a car is healthy, Barcelona usually shows it. If a car is wounded, Barcelona makes the wound visible. And Verstappen's message suggested Red Bull's wound is still open. The problem is that Max Verstappen does not need an easy car. That has never been the point. He can drive a machine that feels sharp. He can handle aggression. He can live with a car that demands precision and punishes hesitation. But he cannot fully attack a car that surprises him. That difference matters. A sharp car reacts quickly. An unpredictable car breaks trust. And once trust breaks, lap time disappears before the stopwatch tells the full story. A driver turns in slightly later. He waits a fraction longer before going to throttle. He leaves a little margin over the curb. He stops attacking the corner and starts managing the risk. Those tiny compromises may look invisible from the outside. But in Formula One, tiny compromises become everything. That is why Verstappen's comments are so serious. He is not simply saying the car is slow. He is saying the car is not giving him the confidence to drive it like a championship weapon. And that changes the entire meaning of Red Bull's season. Because during their dominant years, Red Bull did not just have speed. It had clarity. The car had a direction. Verstappen knew what it would give him. The team knew how to develop it. Rivals were the ones searching for answers. Now, the roles have shifted. Ferrari has moved ahead with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Mercedes has pulled clear in the championship picture. McLaren is close enough to punish every weakness. And Red Bull, the team that once forced everyone else to react, is now the team trying to understand itself. That is a brutal psychological change. When a winning team has a problem, it feels like an inconvenience. When a chasing team has the same problem, it feels like danger. And Red Bull is chasing now. That is why the reported weight issue hurts so much. The car has been described as running 6 to 7 kilograms above the minimum threshold. To a normal person, that sounds small. In Formula One, it is a constant penalty. The car carries that weight through every braking zone, every acceleration point, every direction change, and every long corner. It stresses the tires. It slows response. It makes the car harder to rotate. It can cost around 2/10 per lap, and 2/10 in this sport can change an entire weekend. But the weight is only one part of the chain. More weight puts more load into the tires. More tire load means less grip. Less grip makes the balance harder to control. Poor balance makes the rear more nervous. A nervous rear makes Verstappen hesitate. And hesitation costs more time. That is why this problem feels deeper than anyone thought. It is not one weakness sitting alone. It is a group of weaknesses feeding each other. And that is the nightmare for engineers, because fixing one part can disturb another. A setup change that calms the rear might hurt the front. A change that helps curbs might damage high-speed balance. A change that protects tires might cost aggression. A change that adds stability might make the car too slow. Everything is connected. That is why Barcelona became so revealing. Red Bull did not just need more speed there. It needed proof that the car's foundation was improving. It needed Verstappen to feel that the balance was coming back, that the rear was more predictable, that the operating window was getting wider. Instead, the same warning returned. And repeated warnings are different from new complaints. A new complaint gives a team something to investigate. A repeated complaint tells the team the old investigation has not solved enough. That is where the pressure comes from. Earlier in the season, Verstappen had already talked about the car feeling almost undrivable. He had already pointed toward rear instability at high speed. He had already named the lack of grip and balance as central problems. Those were not emotional throwaway lines. They were symptoms. And Barcelona suggested the symptoms still matter. That is why Red Bull cannot simply say this is Max being Max. Because if the best driver in the team, the driver who carried the entire era of domination, keeps describing the same weakness, the team has to listen more carefully each time. Max is not asking for comfort. He is asking for a car that tells the truth. A car he can trust. A car that lets him attack before the corner, not wait for permission halfway through it. Until Red Bull gives him that, every qualifying session becomes a warning sign. And Barcelona may have been the clearest warning yet, because it forced the team to confront the possibility that the real problem is not a bad weekend. It is the direction of the car. But the second layer is where Red Bull's problem becomes much harder to escape. Because once Verstappen admits the issue feels deeper than a normal setup problem, the entire conversation changes. A setup problem is something a team can explain. The car was too low. The wing level was wrong. The tires were not in the right window. The balance shifted with the track temperature. These are painful problems, but they are familiar. A deeper problem is different. A deeper problem means the car's behavior is connected to the way it was designed. That is the fear Red Bull now has to face. The car is not just missing pace in one area. It appears to be creating a chain reaction of weaknesses. The weight affects the tires. The tires affect the grip. The lack of grip affects the balance. The poor balance affects the rear. The rear instability affects Verstappen's confidence. And once his confidence in the car is damaged, the lap time disappears in places where no simple setup change can easily bring it back. That is why the Barcelona message mattered so much. Verstappen was not saying, "Give me a little more front wing and everything will be fine." He was describing a car that does not give him the trust he needs from corner to corner. And that is a very serious thing for Red Bull, because Max Verstappen's entire driving style is built on commitment. He feels the limit earlier than most drivers. He can live with a car that rotates quickly. He can control a rear end that feels lively, as long as it behaves honestly. But if the rear becomes unpredictable, everything changes. A driver can attack a difficult car. He cannot fully attack a car he does not trust. That is the difference Red Bull is now fighting. And Barcelona made it visible because the circuit keeps the car under load for a long time. It does not let a driver hide from instability. In a long corner, if the rear is nervous, the driver feels that nervousness for several seconds. If the balance is wrong, he cannot simply escape the corner and reset. He has to live inside the weakness until the corner finally ends. That is exhausting. And it destroys rhythm. A great qualifying lap has rhythm. The driver flows from one corner to the next. Confidence builds. The car feels connected. Each clean exit sets up the next braking zone. Each committed entry gives the driver more belief. But when the car is unstable, the rhythm breaks. The driver starts managing. And managing is not the same as attacking. That is why Verstappen's words are so revealing. He is effectively telling Red Bull that the car is forcing him to manage where he should be attacking. And for a team that wants to win championships, that is not acceptable. The weight issue makes the situation even worse. 6 to 7 kilograms over the minimum does not sound dramatic to someone outside Formula 1, but inside the sport it is a constant burden. It is not a problem that appears only once. It follows the car through the entire lap. It makes braking harder. It makes direction changes slower. It puts more stress into the tires. It can make the car feel less responsive when the driver asks it to rotate. And if the car is already struggling with balance, that extra mass becomes more than a number. It becomes a feeling. A heavier car can feel lazier when the driver wants urgency. It can make the tires work harder in long corners. It can increase the sense that the car is pushing against the driver instead of working with him. That is why 0.2 of a second per lap is such a painful estimate. 0.2 is the kind of gap that sounds small until the whole field is separated by tiny margins. 0.2 can change a qualifying result completely. It can put a driver behind cars he should be fighting ahead of. It can force riskier strategy. It can make every weekend feel like recovery instead of control. But again, the weight is not the whole story. That is what makes the situation so dangerous. If Red Bull only needed to remove weight, the mission would be difficult but clear. But Verstappen's feedback points to more than weight. It points to the way the car behaves, the way it responds, the way it handles curbs, the way the rear moves, the way the balance disappears when he needs it most. Those are not separate issues. They are connected through the car's concept. And concept problems are the hardest to fix mid-season. A Formula One car is not a collection of independent pieces. It is a single living system. Change the floor, and the rear balance changes. Change the suspension, and the tire behavior changes. Change the cooling, and the weight distribution changes. Change the ride height, and the aerodynamic platform changes. Everything touches everything. That is why Red Bull cannot simply bolt on one new part and expect the old dominance to return. The team needs a car that is lighter, more stable, more predictable, better over curbs, kinder to tires, and still aggressive enough for Verstappen's style. That is a massive challenge. And the timing is brutal, because the rivals are not waiting. Ferrari has not just improved. It has become the team Red Bull must measure itself against. With Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, Ferrari has both the performance and the star power to control the story of the season. Mercedes has also moved strongly in the championship picture. McLaren is close enough to punish any weakness. So Red Bull is not trying to fix the car in a quiet season where everyone else is struggling too. Red Bull is trying to fix the car while the front of the grid moves away. That creates a dangerous pressure loop. The car is difficult. The results suffer. The pressure increases. The team rushes development. The driver becomes more impatient. The radio becomes sharper. And every session becomes another test of whether the team really understands the problem. That is what Verstappen's admission has exposed. Red Bull is not just searching for lap time. It is searching for certainty. During the dominant years, certainty was Red Bull's greatest weapon. The team knew what it had. Verstappen knew how to extract it. The engineers knew the development direction. Rivals were the ones trying to decode the mystery. Now Red Bull is the team asking questions. Why does the rear not stay stable? Why does the car lose grip in the corners? Why is the operating window so narrow? Why does the car punish curbs and bumps? Why can the team not give Verstappen the same trust he used to feel? Those questions are more dangerous than a bad result. Because a bad result can be isolated. A pattern cannot. And Verstappen has now given Red Bull a pattern it cannot ignore. This is where his role becomes uncomfortable for the team. He is not only driving the car. He is publicly measuring the project. Every time he speaks about the same problems, he is telling the world whether Red Bull's solutions are working. If the car improves, the radio will change. If the radio does not change, everyone will know the core issue remains. That is an enormous pressure on the engineering group. Because the driver is not asking for a miracle. He is asking for fundamentals. Grip, balance, stability, predictability. A car that lets him attack. Without those, Red Bull is not fighting for domination. It is fighting to survive weekends with the best driver it has. That is not sustainable. A champion can drag a difficult car into better positions for a while. Verstappen can still produce moments that hide the true level of the machine. He can still make the Red Bull look better than it is. But that creates another problem. If Max keeps rescuing results, the outside world may underestimate the crisis. The points may soften the alarm. The team may still appear close enough to recover. But the radio tells the truth that results can hide. It tells us the car still does not feel right. And if the car does not feel right to Verstappen, then Red Bull has a problem that goes beyond lap time. It has a trust problem. Trust is not easy to rebuild. It cannot be promised in a meeting. It cannot be fixed by a confident interview. It has to be felt, corner by corner, lap by lap, weekend by weekend.